Good morning from the European Parliament. Today is Earth Day, and we are here to celebrate this special day with very important news that took place actually this week here in Brussels. Europe's fight against climate change has taken another step with a provisional agreement on the European climate law. It's one of the key elements of the European Green Deal, and it's focused on our commitment to reach climate neutrality by 2050. We are here to discuss this subject with our members, Nils Torvalds. He is a Renew Europe coordinator for the Environment Committee, and Mr. Pascal Canfin. He is the chair of the European Parliament's Committee of Environment. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you so much for your time. My first question, how do you feel? It took 14 hours of negotiations all night long to achieve this agreement. First question, well, first, thank you for doing this and for your hard work. And second, are we happy or satisfied generally with the outcome? Mr. Torvalds, please.
Well, I think there is a psychological effect. During the morning of the day when we reached the agreement, I was actually more critical towards myself because I had been focusing so much on what we wanted to achieve that I didn't actually look so much on what we did as on what we didn't achieve. And so therefore I was slightly sort of, no, we didn't do it really the way I had wanted to do it. Then after having slept for 10 hours last night, I'm sort of, okay, actually we did it fairly well.
Mr. Canfin, how do you feel?
Well, I feel a bit more relaxed after having found the agreement and slept a few hours. But this is a real game changer. Imagine we do not have the climate law now. We will still be at either minus 40% or minus 51%, because actually it was the low end of the council position. And we managed, thanks to the parliament, to have a higher ambition up to 57% as a new target. So that's why we can be proud of what we have been doing. Of course, as Nils knows that by heart as well, the parliament and Renew was ready to go further, even further than that. But it's a good compromise, and probably the best compromise we could ever extract from this night of negotiation.
Okay, so we had a 57% of gas greenhouse reductions emissions. This is the target for 2030. And obviously, we want to achieve the full carbon neutrality by 2050. What's going to happen in between? Are there going to be new targets maybe in 2040, or how will we follow up and so to actually push for more? Mr. Torvalds?
Well, one of the achievements where the parliament was actually the real game changer, that has to do with the budget, because what's going on in the field of climate change is that we have changed the approach to the problem several times, which again makes the companies slightly uncertain. So by introducing the budget into the legislation, we have actually introduced a stable way of judging what's going to happen there. So therefore, I think we really have achieved something which then in its turn will enable the investments we're going to need. So when I said I was critical in the beginning of the day after, and now when I look at what we have achieved, I'm more convinced that we have done something which will be measured then after 15 or 20 years. And then they will say, oh, they were wise guys out there at that time.
Yeah.
Well, to give you a flavor of the acceleration, thanks to the deal we had a couple of hours ago, we are going to go 2.5 times faster in reducing our emissions for the next decade, from now on to 2030, than what we did for the last decade between 2010 and 2020. If you drive a car and your speed is 50 kilometers per hour, and you have a 2.5 times acceleration, it means that you end up at 125 kilometers. So actually what we did is we moved the reduction emissions from 50 kilometers to 125. You can see the huge difference between the two speeds and the new era, I would say, we are going to enter through this climate law.
So now that we had a lot of this ambition for the climate targets that has been going on through last year and this year, and now it's becoming a law. So how can the EU, or from here, from the institutions, what can we do then to make sure that member states, which obviously are the ones responsible for achieving these targets, what did they need to do? Because the first thing that comes in my mind when I think of reducing emissions is big factories and the big polluters and the cars. How can then, so who is responsible then now to take action and make sure that these reductions take place?
I think Pascal should actually start this, because he was one of those who was very tight on the question of sectoral roadmap. So I think Pascal has the right to go into this issue.
Okay, thank you. I would say that, if we would have had only the climate law as such, we probably will not deliver on the target. But the fact is that not only we have the climate law now fully agreed, but what will happen from now on up to the end of 2022 is that we are going to change 50 laws. 50 European laws will be changed precisely to adapt the new rules of the game, I would say, to the new targets 2030, 2040, and 2050. In less than 2 months, we are going to change the carbon market price. We are going to change the automotive standards. We are going to change new rules on the green finance, and so on and so on and so on. So as Renew, we put together a leaflet with these 50 laws. Actually, it's more than 50, it's 54. But let's say 50 laws that will implement concretely the Green Deal. And you take the example of automotive, we are going to change the standards in a way that very likely we will have a date, probably 2035, where we will end the sales of thermal vehicles, meaning gasoline or diesel cars, to move from full electric or to move to a hybrid if it makes sense at that time. So that's the kind of very concrete examples to explain that once we have set the target, we are going to change the rules in order to reach this target. And as Nils said, I was just talking about the legislative part, but we have also other tools to get there. So we have now a real big toolbox that we will still work on, of course, still improve, still increase. That's why I'm quite confident that we will reach this new target.
But when we are doing something like Pascal said, changing 54 different regulations, different laws, then we need sort of be going in one direction in a consequential way. So that what we are, the signal we are giving now is that from now on, we don't change the way in which things are done. We produce a pathway to the future, and this pathway is stable. And that is probably the most important part, because that makes it possible for everybody who is involved in this in the future to look, okay, this is the way we are going, and now we have to keep to this pathway, and by that we can do it.
And
that's the renewed touch, I would say, to this, meaning that it's not only setting the target, it's also changing the business models and making sure that together with at least the progressive companies, then we unlock investments, both public and private, to change the business model, spread the technologies, and so on. And that's where, as Renew, we have a strong value, added value, because that's exactly the core of the DNA of our political family.
Exactly. As you just said, it's not just about maybe trying to find the big polluters, which is something that, for instance, we want to do with our own resources, but this is a different conversation. We have to obviously invest and make sure that small companies also, they can be greener and they can be more sustainable. We also have to go sustainable in finance. So there are many ways on how to tackle. But my question is like, what can we, the citizens, the people at home that are watching us, what can we do? Which small things can we do to fight climate change? We know, for instance, that obviously going for public transport or greener transport is an option, avoid a bit of plastic or more plastic. What kind of things we can do ourselves to contribute to this?
Well, I think, first of all, I think every citizen has to understand that this is not something we can do just by telling from upside that you down there, you have to do this and that, because that approach would probably create more negative feelings than many other things. So the thing we have to communicate is actually that by changing your own private life, by changing the way in which you live, we are going to make this happen. And that is, if you look at, as a Finnish example, Finland was probably 30, 40 years ago known for being a fairly sort of remote part of Europe. Then came the first pizzeria. And food practice are actually something very, very, very conservative. But the pizza sort of took fire in Finland, and all of a sudden, everybody was ready to change their cultural pattern. And I think we are in for the same thing now. We have to change some of the cultural patterns, and we have to change the way in which we look at food. So the climate law is nothing. It's not about just the big companies. The climate law is about everyday life. It's about how we sort the garbage. It's about how we live everyday life, how we go out into nature. So it's going to, during the next few 10 to 15 years up to 2050, we are actually going to change the way in which we understand everyday life, and I think that's a really big issue.
No, I don't have a lot to add to what Nils said about the individual gestures. I mean, we more or less all know what we have to do regarding food, transportation, energy, and so on. But just as politicians, what we have in mind, at least what I have in mind, is a triangle, where you have on one angle of the triangle is technologies, solutions that has to be put on the market by mainly corporates and private actors. Also with a bit of public money, but that's mainly the role of corporates to do so. You have the second angle of the triangle, which is the role of politicians, which is to have the proper sets of rules so that you can speed up the battle against climate change, to have the right investment in place, the right technologies in place. And the third angle of the triangle is the individual behaviors. And exactly what you said, the patterns, the expectations, what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, what is trendy, what is not trendy, things like that in our mindset. And if we do not adjust the three, if it doesn't fit, then we will not deliver. Because then, as politicians, we would take rules, but then it will never be implemented by citizens. They will say, well, I don't want your things like that. I don't want to live that way. Or we set a rule, we fix a rule, but we don't have the right technologies. So nothing happens. So we have all the time to have this triangle in mind. and to make sure that we move forward. And then at the end of the day, that's the only way to move forward and to win the climate battle.
Exactly. So your job is extremely important because without legislation, actually, if legislations are needed, it's because things are not going well. Otherwise, if we all did at home what you just suggested, if we all went a bit greener with our groceries, with circular economy, with trying to preserve and to take care of the nature even more, there probably would not be no needs for this legislation to actually impose these targets. But obviously, it's very important that people at home then take conscious of it all depends on us. Today is actually Earth Day, so it was a coincidence that this agreement was this week and that we can celebrate it today.
Actually, no. It's less about Earth Day itself that the Biden summit, so the climate summit that is convened by Biden, the US being back to the Paris Agreement, and we decided to say, well, that's the window of opportunity to finalize the negotiation. Because you said at the beginning that it took us 14 hours, but it didn't took us 14 hours for the whole negotiation. I mean, it took us months for the whole negotiation and 14 hours as in a row to finalize the deal. And of course, to have a deadline. The deadline was this April 22nd, it was today, so that we can go to the international summit with a finally agreed, strong and ambitious climate law.
But you could also say that from this day on, it's Earth Day every day, because that's sort of that's the solution for the long time. If we celebrate it once in a year, then we won't do it. So we celebrate Earth Day every day from here on, and that's going to be sort of what we are doing together with Pascal.
One last question. We are now then happy that at least we have again the US back with the Paris Agreement. Even if Europe is still the leader in climate change, we are demonstrating it now day by day. What about the relation with other nations? Which are the hopes or expectations that actually all of us, China, Japan, India, Russia, that it's not just a European thing, that we can all commit to these targets? How do you see the situation at the moment with the other nations?
Well, I could start with Russia because I actually been living there for 6 years, and I do think I know it. Russia is in this race and starting from a very complicated situation, because so much of the budget, about half of the budget, comes from gas or neft, of oil. So if they don't change their life, then their budget will go down. When the budget goes down, then the system will be even more destabilized. So my conclusion is for everybody, and that goes for all the countries, that you better jump on the train now before it's too late.
Well, nothing to add regarding Russia. I mean, that's key. I mean, obviously for the US, I mean, it's better to have an ally, and we have a battle for leadership. But at the end of the day, it's a good race. That's the only race that is worth having, actually, with the US. Meaning that who will be the climate leader, and if and then at the end of the day, it will be a joint leadership, because we have so many things in common regarding technologies, markets, financial markets, vision, democracy, and so on, that when you look at the European Green Deal, and when you look at the US Biden plan, it's very, very close. Of course, there are a few things on which we match, not less than diverge, not being fully aligned, but that's more or less the same agenda. Having in mind one big difference, this big difference that the US are the largest exporter of fossil energy. We are in the EU in the exact opposite situation. We are net importer by far. So it's even more difficult in the US than for us. So that's why US and EU cooperating on the climate action is a key element. And as just one figure, we amount, the two of us, EU plus US, we amount for 40% of the global economy. If we do the transition right, we transition almost half of the global economy, just the two of us. So it gives you the scale of what we are, what we have ahead of us. And then one last word regarding China. China today has a good long-term goal, 2060 for climate neutrality, but is not delivering enough short-term. And we have to say that China is not delivering enough short-term. And once we have now the Green Deal, the climate law, the 50 laws in Europe that have to be changed, plus the UN climate plan and the new US target that will be made public in a few minutes now, then maximum pressure should be put on China to align itself on these two plans we have in the EU and in the US.
Okay. Thanks so much. I'm happy, for instance, that we already have at least good trade agreements with China or with United States, but obviously we have to go further. Thanks again for your time. We will follow very close what's next, because this legislation, it just came now, but we obviously have a lot of work to do and we are running out of time. So thanks so much for your time and for your contribution, and happy Earth Day every day.